It was just after 3 a.m. on October 12, 2023, when the first alert flashed on the screen at the Space Surveillance Center in Colorado Springs. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional click of a keyboard. Most of the staff were half asleep watching the slow crawl of known satellites across their monitors. Nothing unusual ever happened at this hour, just the usual dance of metal and solar panels circling the Earth, tracked, logged, and forgotten. Then the alarm sounded, not a loud siren but a sharp, repeating beep that cut through the drowsy silence like a knife. Every head in the room turned toward Station 7, where a young analyst named Elena Ruiz sat frozen, her eyes wide. "What is it?" asked Sergeant Mike Lowell, walking over with a half-empty coffee cup in his hand. Elena didn't answer right away. She stared at the data scrolling across her screen. Speed, altitude, trajectory, all changing too fast to be normal. "There's something up there," she said slowly. "It's not in the catalog," Lowell frowned. "Glitch? I don't think so." She tapped a few keys, pulling up radar returns from 3 different tracking stations: Vandenberg in California, Clear in Alaska, and Thule in Greenland. All 3 showed the same thing: a single object, small but dense, moving at over 15,000 miles per hour, dipping into low Earth orbit from a steep angle no satellite should take. And it had no signal. Every satellite, every piece of space junk larger than a softball, carried some kind of identifier, a transponder, a radio ping, even just a predictable heat signature. This thing had none. It was dark, silent, invisible to normal tracking systems until it was already overhead. "Run a cross-check," Lowell said, his voice tighter now. Elena did. She searched the U.S. Space Command database. Over 47,000 known objects in orbit. Nothing matched. She checked with NATO allies, then with commercial satellite operators like SpaceX and OneWeb. Still nothing. Even the Russians and Chinese had no record of it in their public or semi-public launch logs. "It's like it just appeared," she whispered. By 3:18 a.m., the duty officer had called the watch commander. By 3:25, a secure line rang in the Pentagon. By 3:40, a 4-star general was sitting up in bed in Virginia, listening to a voice on the phone say, "Sir, we have an untracked object in LEO. Speed is hypersonic. Behavior is unpredictable." At 4:02 a.m., the National Military Command Center activated its Space Anomaly Protocol, codename Night Echo. Back in Colorado, Elena watched as the object completed its first full orbit. It moved faster than the International Space Station. Faster than spy satellites, faster than anything man-made should move without burning up. Yet it held together. It even changed course slightly, just a nudge, but enough to prove it wasn't drifting debris. It was under control. "Who's flying that thing?" Lowell muttered, rubbing his eyes. "No one we know," Elena replied. She pulled up thermal imaging from an infrared satellite. The object glowed faintly, not from friction but from some internal heat source. The shape was smooth, almost organic, like a teardrop wrapped in polished metal. No solar panels. No antennas. No visible engines. "It's not Russian," she said. "Their stealth sats still leak heat in patterns we recognize." "Chinese?" Lowell asked. "They've got new stuff, sure," Elena said, "but not this. This is different." She thought of the old files she'd read during her PhD research. Cold War reports from the 1970s about phantom orbits. Strange blips that vanished before they could be studied. Back then they were blamed on Soviet tricks or faulty radar. But what if they weren't? She typed a quick note into her secure log. "Object exhibits non-ballistic trajectory adjustments. Possible advanced propulsion. Recommend immediate escalation." Before she could hit send, her screen flickered. A red banner appeared. "Classified eyes only. Level Omega." A new window opened automatically. It was a live feed from the president's daily brief team. Someone upstairs had already woken the White House. By 5 a.m., the sun was just beginning to rise over the Rockies, but inside the bunker-like building, it might as well have been midnight. Phones rang constantly. Officers moved quickly, speaking in low, urgent voices. Coffee cups piled up in corners. On the main display wall, a single red dot traced a path around the globe. Circling, circling, circling. Second orbit complete. Third orbit began. Each pass brought it closer to populated areas, first over the Pacific, then South America, then the southern United States. Air traffic control was quietly alerted to watch for anything strange in the upper atmosphere. Fighter jets in Florida and Texas were put on standby, though no one knew what they'd be chasing. Elena tried to stay calm. She'd trained for this, but nothing in her simulations had prepared her for something this clean, this fast, this unknown. At 5:33 a.m., the object did something new. It slowed down. Not a lot, but enough to drop its altitude from 250 miles to 180 miles in under 2 minutes. Normal satellites couldn't do that without huge bursts of fuel. This thing did it silently, smoothly, like a bird adjusting its wings. "That's not possible," Lowell said, staring at the numbers. "It just did it," Elena said. She ran a quick calculation. At this rate, the object could deorbit, hover, or even, though she hated to think it, target a location on the ground. Her stomach twisted. She picked up the secure phone on her desk. "I need to speak to Dr. Chen in orbital threat assessment. Now." Minutes later, Dr. Lin Chen, the lead scientist for space defense, joined the call from his home in Maryland. He listened as Elena described the data. "Send me everything," he said. Raw feeds, thermal logs, trajectory plots. While she transferred the files, Elena noticed something else. The object's path wasn't random. It was passing over major climate research stations, Mauna Loa in Hawaii, the Amazon monitoring outposts, the Arctic ice sensors, places that tracked carbon, methane, sea levels, not military sites, not cities. Why? Before she could dig deeper, a colonel walked in and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're coming with me," he said. She was escorted to a secure briefing room where 3 generals and a woman in a dark suit, CIA probably, waited. They didn't ask questions. They just stared at the live feed on the wall. "That ship's not in any records," the woman said, her voice flat. "And it's moving fast." No one argued. By 6:15 a.m., the president had been briefed. The National Security Council was convening by video. Orders went out to all space tracking assets. Watch it. Do not engage. Do not broadcast. And above all, do not let the public find out. But it was already too late for that. In a small town in New Mexico, an amateur astronomer named Tom Reyes had pointed his backyard telescope at the sky just before dawn. He'd seen a bright, fast-moving light, no blinking, no trail, zip across the stars in under 10 seconds. He recorded it on his phone and posted it online with the caption, "What the heck was that?" Within an hour, the video had 50,000 views. In Colorado, Elena sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the red dot as it began its 4th orbit. She thought about her grandmother, who used to say, "When the sky shows you something new, don't reach for a weapon. Reach for your eyes." But this wasn't her grandmother's world. This was a world of missiles, satellites, and secrets. And right now, something was flying over all of it. Unseen, unknown, and utterly beyond control. The room stayed silent. The dot kept moving, and somewhere high above the Earth, the ship, whatever it was, continued its quiet, perfect path through the dark. By mid-morning on October 12th, the secret was already cracking. What had begun as a quiet alarm in a Colorado control room was now rippling through intelligence networks across the globe. In Moscow, generals gathered in a dimly lit bunker beneath the Defense Ministry. In Beijing, Space Command officers reviewed radar logs with growing concern. In London, Paris, and Tokyo, diplomats exchanged hushed calls, each asking the same question. "Do you know what that is?" No one did. Back in the United States, the White House had issued a short public statement. An unidentified object has been detected in Earth's orbit. Experts are analyzing the situation. There is no threat to public safety. The words were calm, but inside government buildings, panic was rising. The object, still circling the planet every 88 minutes, was now being tracked by more than a dozen military and civilian systems. Yet every new piece of data only made it stranger. It gave off no radio signals. It reflected sunlight in odd, shifting patterns. And it kept changing its path in ways that defied physics as most engineers understood it. At the Space Surveillance Center, Elena Ruiz had barely slept. She'd been working nonstop since 3 a.m., drinking coffee that tasted like burnt water. Her eyes were red, but her mind was sharp. She kept returning to one fact. The object kept flying over places that studied the Earth's climate. Not military bases, not missile silos, not cities. Why? She mentioned this to Dr. Lin Chen during a secure video call. You're saying it's an environmental probe? He asked, skeptical. I'm saying it's acting like one, Elena replied. It slows down over the Amazon. It dips lower near the Arctic ice caps. It's collecting something, maybe air samples, maybe radiation levels. Chen rubbed his chin. Or it's pretending to. That was the problem. In a world where every nation spied on every other, nothing could be taken at face value. A peaceful science mission could be a cover for testing new stealth tech. A harmless satellite could hide weapons. Trust was gone. Meanwhile, outside the government, the story was spreading fast. Tom Reyes's video from New Mexico had been shared by news sites, science blogs, and conspiracy forums. By noon, their mystery ship was trending on social media. People posted shaky phone footage from Australia, South Africa, and Norway, all showing the same fast, silent light streaking across the sky. Some claimed it was a secret U.S. weapon. Others said it was Russian. A few insisted it was alien. One popular YouTube channel declared, "The government is hiding the truth," and got 500,000 views in 3 hours. NASA tried to calm things down. A spokesperson said, "Many objects in orbit can appear unusual to the naked eye. This is likely space debris or a private satellite." But even NASA didn't know for sure. They'd asked the Department of Defense for details and were told, not authorized to share. In Moscow, the Russian government held a press conference. "We confirm an unknown object is in orbit," said a stern-faced general. "It is not ours. We urge the United States to explain what it has launched." The words were careful, but the message was clear. If this was an American weapon, Russia would respond. China stayed quiet. But satellite images later showed Chinese military bases going on high alert. Fighter jets were scrambled near their space launch centers. Their space station, Tiangong, adjusted its orbit slightly, as if to avoid something. Back in Colorado, Elena watched all this unfold on a second monitor while tracking the object on her main screen. She felt helpless. She knew more than almost anyone about what was up there, but she couldn't tell anyone. Not the public, not even her family. At 2 p.m., a new alert came in. The object had released something, not a weapon, not a missile, but a small cloud of tiny particles no bigger than grains of sand, drifting into the upper atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. Sensors picked up no explosion, no radiation, just a gentle puff of material spreading slowly in the thin air. "What is it?" Lowell asked, leaning over her shoulder. Elena ran a quick analysis. "Looks like sensors, microprobes. They're designed to float and collect data, temperature, gas composition, maybe even pollution levels." "So it's a science mission?" He asked. "Maybe," she said. "But why hide it? Why not just file a launch permit like everyone else?" That was the real mystery. Building and launching a spacecraft like this would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Only governments or giant companies could afford it. And yet no one claimed it. No launch had been seen. No rocket had lit up the sky unless... Elena remembered something. A year ago, a tech billionaire named Eris Thorne had disappeared from the public eye. He'd made his fortune in electric planes and clean energy, then sold his company and vanished. Rumors said he'd bought an island in Iceland. Others said he was building a secret lab under a volcano. Thorne had once given a speech saying, "The sky belongs to everyone, not just armies and corporations." He'd also criticized how little the world knew about real-time climate change. Could he have built this? She typed his name into a classified database. Nothing came up. But that didn't mean anything. Rich people could hide things. At 4 p.m., the president met with his national security team. The mood was tense. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs wanted to treat the object as a potential threat. "We can't let something this fast and this stealthy fly over our cities without knowing who controls it," he said. The Secretary of State disagreed. "If we shoot at it and it's just a science probe, we look like fools or worse, aggressors." In the end, they decided to watch and wait. But they also gave the order to prepare an intercept missile, just in case. While leaders argued, ordinary people kept watching the skies. In Chile, a group of school children saw the object pass overhead during recess. Their teacher filmed it and sent the video to a local university. In Kenya, a farmer reported a silver star moving against the wind. In Canada, air traffic controllers logged an unusual radar echo near the North Pole. Every sighting added to the confusion and the fear. That evening, Elena finally stepped outside for fresh air. The Colorado wind was cold. She looked up at the darkening sky and wondered if the object was passing overhead right now. Was someone or something looking back down at her? Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Chen. Found something. Call me. She hurried back inside. On the secure line, Chen sounded excited. I pulled old files from the 1970s. During the Cold War, both the US and USSR reported strange objects in orbit that vanished after a few days. They were called ghost sats. Most were written off as mistakes. But some logs, they described behavior just like this. Like what? Elena asked, silent, fast, no signal, flying over scientific stations. One report even mentions microparticle release. Elena's heart beat faster. So this has happened before? Maybe. Or maybe someone studied those old reports and built something new based on them. They talked for 10 more minutes, then hung up. Elena sat at her desk, thinking. If this was a repeat of a Cold War mystery, then it wasn't an invasion. It was a message, but what was the message? By 9 p.m., the object had completed its 12th orbit. It was still releasing tiny probes, now over the Indian Ocean, now over the Sahara. Each time, the particles drifted down slowly, collecting data before burning up or dissolving. Then, without warning, it did something new. It began to broadcast. Not a voice. Not a warning, but a steady repeating signal, a series of beeps and tones that lasted exactly 60 seconds, then started again. Within minutes, radio astronomers around the world tuned in. At first, they thought it was noise, but then a young intern at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico noticed a pattern. It's numbers, she said, her voice shaking. Prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Prime numbers are universal. They can't happen by accident. Any intelligent being, human or not, would recognize them as a sign of design. The signal also included a frequency, 1420 megahertz. That was the hydrogen line, the natural radio wave given off by hydrogen atoms, the most common element in the universe. Scientists had long suggested using it as a cosmic calling card for contacting other life. And finally, the signal carried coordinates, not on Earth, but in deep space. They pointed to a star system called TRAPPIST-1, 40 light-years away, known to have 7 Earth-like planets. The message was clear. We are here. We are watching. And we are not alone in wondering. But who was we? In Washington, the discovery sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. Was this proof of alien life? Or was it a clever trick? A human-made signal designed to look alien? Elena believed it was the latter. Too clean. Too textbook. Like someone was quoting from a SETI handbook. Still, the effect was powerful. Within hours, scientists, philosophers, and religious leaders were all talking about the signal. The panic began to shift, not to fear of attack, but to awe, confusion, and hope. But in the halls of power, caution ruled. At midnight, the Pentagon updated its orders. Do not engage. Continue monitoring. Prepare for all scenarios. Elena went back to her station. The red dot kept moving. The signal kept playing. And the world, for the first time in a long time, looked up not with suspicion but with wonder. Yet deep down, Elena knew one thing. Whoever built that ship didn't just want to be seen, they wanted to be understood. By the morning of October 13th, the world was watching the skies like never before. Telescopes, radar dishes, and backyard cameras were all pointed upward. The strange object, now nicknamed the Ghost by news outlets, had circled Earth more than 20 times. It had released dozens of tiny probes, broadcast a signal using prime numbers, and shown no sign of slowing down. Governments stayed quiet, but rumors flew faster than the object itself. Inside the Pentagon, the mood had shifted from confusion to urgency. Top military leaders met in a secure room deep underground. On the table was a single plan, Operation Nightfall. The idea was simple. Launch a missile from a Navy destroyer in the Pacific. Use a modified SM-3 interceptor, a weapon designed to shoot down enemy missiles to hit the object before it completed its next orbit. It's too fast, too smart, and too unknown, said General Hayes, head of U.S. Space Command. We can't let it keep flying over our cities without knowing who controls it. But what if it's not a weapon? Asked Dr. Lin Chen, who had been called in as a civilian advisor. What if destroying it starts a war, or worse, destroys vital scientific data? We don't have the luxury of waiting for answers, Hayes replied. If it's hostile, we're already behind. If it's friendly, it should have identified itself by now. The room fell silent. The president had given them the green light to prepare the strike, but not to fire. That order would come only if the object showed clear signs of threat. Back in Colorado, Elena Ruiz had heard about Nightfall through a hushed conversation between officers. Her stomach dropped. She knew the SM-3 could reach low orbit. She also knew that hitting a small, fast-moving target like the Ghost would be like threading a needle while riding a roller coaster. Worse, if the object exploded, the debris could damage real satellites, GPS, weather, communications, everything modern life depended on. She tried to speak up. She sent a report titled, Alternative Interpretation of Object Behavior, listing all the non-threatening actions it had taken. Flying over climate stations, releasing harmless sensors, broadcasting a peaceful signal. But her message vanished into the classified system unread. At 10 a.m., the Ghost did something no one expected. It slowed down, dramatically. From 15,000 miles per hour, it dropped to just 5,000. It settled into a stable orbit 120 miles above the Pacific Ocean, right between Hawaii and California. Then for the first time it turned, not randomly. It rotated slowly until one smooth side faced Earth, and then it began to glow. Not with fire or heat, but with a soft blue-white light, like sunlight on ice. Cameras on weather satellites captured it clearly. The surface shimmered as if made of liquid metal. At the same time, the signal changed. The prime numbers stopped. In their place came a new pattern, longer, more complex. This time, scientists recognized it quickly. It was the same signal used in the 1974 Arecibo message, humanity's first attempt to contact alien life. But this version was updated. It included new Earth's current population, levels of carbon dioxide in the air, the locations of melting glaciers. It was a mirror. The Ghost wasn't sending a message from outer space. It was sending one back to Earth, about Earth. In observatories from Chile to Japan, astronomers gasped. "It's showing us ourselves," said one researcher on live TV. "It's measuring our planet's health." In Washington, the intercept order was put on hold. General Hayes stared at the new data on his screen. His hands were clenched. "If this is a trick," he muttered, "it's a very clever one." But Elena saw the truth. This wasn't an invasion. It was an inspection. She finally got a chance to speak directly to the crisis team. Using a secure video link, she laid out her case calmly. "The object has never acted like a weapon," she said. "It avoids populated areas. It doesn't carry explosives. It doesn't jam signals. Everything it's done matches the behavior of an environmental monitoring platform. Just one built with technology far beyond what we have." She paused. "And the signal? It's not alien. It's human. Someone built this to show us how blind we've become." "Who?" asked a CIA officer. "I don't know for sure," Elena admitted. "But I think it's Eris Thorne." That name caught their attention. Thorne was famous and controversial. A genius engineer who'd walked away from billions to save the planet, as he once put it. He'd criticized governments for spending trillions on weapons while ignoring climate collapse. He'd also spoken about building eyes in the sky that can't be turned off. No one had seen him in 2 years. Now, it seemed he'd built his eyes. At noon, the Navy ship USS Decatur, stationed 300 miles west of Los Angeles, received new orders. Stand down. The missile would not be launched. For now, but the world still didn't know the truth. News channels kept calling it a mystery object. Conspiracy theories grew wilder. Some said it was a UFO. Others claimed it was a secret Chinese weapon. Only a few scientists quietly suggested it might be a private mission gone rogue. Then at 2 p.m., something small but important happened. One of the microprobes released by the Ghost drifted down over the coast of Oregon. It landed gently in a farmer's field no bigger than a grain of rice. The farmer found it, thought it was a piece of foil, and tossed it in a jar. But his son, a high school student, took it to his science teacher. The teacher, curious, sent it to a university lab. By 4 p.m., the results came back. The probe was made of biodegradable material. Inside was a tiny sensor that had measured methane levels in the upper atmosphere. It carried no weapons, no tracking chips, just data. and etched into its side in microscopic letters was a symbol, a circle with a leaf inside. That symbol matched the logo of Thorne's old clean energy company. The news spread fast. Within hours, labs in Europe and Asia confirmed the same thing. All recovered probes were harmless, eco-friendly, and branded with Thorne's mark. The alien signal was starting to look very human. In Colorado, Elena felt a wave of relief but also anger. Thorne had scared the world. He'd made governments think they were under attack. He'd risked a war, all to prove a point, but maybe, she thought, that was the only way anyone would listen. At 6 p.m., the Ghost did one last thing. It released a final burst of data, not as a signal but as a public file. Using a weak but open radio frequency, it sent a simple message anyone with a ham radio could receive. The file contained maps, real-time images of deforestation in the Amazon, heat maps of ocean warming, graphs of rising CO2, and a short text note. You track missiles better than you track your own planet. Wake up. The message was signed with just 2 letters, A.T. Aris Thorne, now. There was no doubt in Moscow Russian officials called it a dangerous stunt. In Beijing, state media called it Western propaganda. But in schools, labs, and town halls around the world, people were talking not about war but about the planet. That night, the president gave a rare primetime address. He didn't confirm Thorne's name, but he said, "An unregistered object has shown us how little we know about our own world. We must respond not with fear, but with action." He announced a new international effort to monitor climate change from space with full transparency. Meanwhile, the Ghost stayed in orbit, quiet again. It no longer broadcast. It no longer released probes. It simply watched. Elena stood outside the surveillance center, looking up at the stars. She knew the military still wanted to bring it down. But public opinion had shifted. Destroying it now would look like silencing a warning. She thought about Thorne, wherever he was. Had he known how close the world came to shooting his ship out of the sky? Had he counted on that fear to make his point? Maybe. But one thing was certain. The Galactic Empire, the network of powerful nations and militaries that ruled the skies, had panicked over something that meant no harm. They'd mistaken care for threat, science for sabotage, and in doing so, they'd revealed their true weakness. They were ready for war, but not for truth. As the night deepened, Elena went back inside. Her shift wasn't over. The Ghost was still up there, and someone had to keep watching, not with weapons but with eyes wide open, because the real mission wasn't over. It had just begun. 2 days after the signal, the world still hadn't stopped talking about the object in the sky, but the fear was gone. In its place was something rarer. Curiosity, shame, and a quiet kind of hope. People weren't asking, "Is it attacking us?" anymore. They were asking, "Why didn't we see this coming?" Then, on the morning of October 15th, Aris Thorne walked into a small community center in Reykjavik, Iceland. He wore a simple gray coat, no hat, no sunglasses. His hair was longer than in his old photos, and his face was tired, but his eyes were sharp. He carried a single backpack. No guards, no cameras. Just him. Inside, a group of local students, scientists, and journalists waited. They'd been told a guest speaker would talk about the future of Earth observation. No one expected it to be him. When he stepped onto the low wooden stage, silence fell. "I built that ship," he said, his voice calm. "Its name is the Vigil." No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared. Thorne didn't smile. He didn't apologize. He explained, "I spent 3 years and most of my fortune building it," he said. "Not to spy, not to scare, but to show you what you've stopped seeing." He described how governments tracked every missile, every spy satellite, every piece of space junk, but ignored the slow, quiet death of the planet. Forests burning, oceans heating, ice vanishing, all of it happening in real time, yet hidden behind reports, politics, and noise. "So I built a ghost," he said, "something fast enough to avoid detection, quiet enough to go unnoticed, smart enough to collect the truth. And I sent it up not to speak for aliens, but to speak for Earth." He showed them blueprints, simple ones, on a projector borrowed from the school. The Vigil was no bigger than a small car. Its skin was made of a new material that bent radar waves and absorbed heat, making it nearly invisible to military sensors. Its engine used a type of electric propulsion so smooth it left no exhaust trail, and its brain was an AI trained only on climate data. Not weapons, not surveillance, just the health of the planet. I didn't hide it because I wanted to trick you, Thorne said. I hid it because if I'd asked for permission, you would have said no. Or worse, you would have turned it into a weapon. He paused. You track threats better than you track survival. After his talk, the room exploded with questions. Reporters called their editors. Within an hour, live video of Thorne spread across the internet. By noon, he was on every major news channel. The U.S. government was furious. This was an illegal launch, said a Pentagon spokesperson. It violated international space law. He bypassed all safety and security protocols. Russia called it a reckless act of techno-terrorism. China demanded an investigation, but the public didn't care about the rules. They cared about the message. In schools, teachers played Thorne's speech. In villages, farmers nodded in agreement. In cities, young people organized rallies calling for eyes like the Vigil, but open, not secret. Even scientists who had once mocked Thorne now admitted he was right. We've been shouting for decades, said Dr. Lena Okoye, a climate researcher in Nairobi. But no one listened until a ghost flew over their heads. Back in Colorado, Elena Ruiz watched Thorne's speech on a small screen in the break room. She felt a strange mix of anger and admiration. He had risked everything, global panic, military response, even war to make a point. And it worked, but she also knew the cost. For 3 days, the world had teetered on the edge of fear. Fighter jets had been ready. Missiles had been armed. All because one man decided the truth needed a disguise. Later that day, she received a secure message from Dr. Chen. They're going to arrest him. Elena's heart sank. Of course they were. Thorne had broken laws. He'd flown an unregistered spacecraft over sovereign airspace. He'd triggered emergency protocols in half the world's militaries. Legally, he could face decades in prison, but as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. No Icelandic police came for him. No U.S. agents landed in Reykjavik. Instead, the Icelandic government issued a statement. Mr. Thorne is a guest of this nation. He has broken no Icelandic laws. We respect his right to speak. Iceland had no space program, no military, no reason to punish a man who only wanted to protect the planet. The U.S. couldn't just storm in and take him. It would look like silencing a whistleblower. So they waited. Meanwhile, Thorne kept talking. He gave interviews. He shared data from the Vigil, real, raw numbers about methane leaks from oil fields, illegal logging in the Amazon, plastic swirling in ocean gyres. He didn't hide anything now. He opened all of it to the public, and people listened. In Washington, pressure grew. Environmental groups, tech leaders, even some members of Congress began calling for a different response. Don't jail him, said Senator Maria Lopez. Work with him. Build more ships like the Vigil, but legally, openly together. At the United Nations, a new proposal moved fast, the Outer Space Transparency Accord. It called for all Earth-observing satellites, government or private, to share climate data openly, in real time, with no secrecy. Over 70 countries signed on within a week. Thorne smiled when he heard the news. That's all I wanted, he told a reporter. Not fame, not fear, just eyes that can't be closed. But not everyone was happy. Inside the Pentagon, hardliners still saw him as a threat. He showed us how blind we are, General Hayes told a closed meeting. What if someone worse uses the same trick? What if next time it's not a climate probe but a bomb? Their fear wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. Still, the world had changed too. Amateur astronomers now scanned the skies not for UFOs, but for signs of new environmental satellites. Universities started programs in ethical space observation. And kids drew pictures of the Vigil, not as a weapon but as a guardian. Elena, for her part, was given a new job. She was asked to lead a civilian team that would monitor space objects, not for threats but for science. Her first task? Help design the next generation of open, peaceful Earth watchers. She thought about Thorne often. Was he a hero, a fool, a little of both? Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that he made the world look up, and then look down at itself. On October 18, Thorne gave his last public talk. He stood on a hill outside Reykjavik, with the northern lights dancing above him. I'm not staying, he said. My work here is done. People asked where he was going. He just smiled. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I can build the next one. No one knew if he meant another ship or something else entirely. That night he disappeared again. Some said he flew to a remote island. Others claimed he boarded a cargo ship bound for Antarctica. A few even joked he'd gone to space himself. But the truth was simpler. He vanished because he never wanted to be a celebrity. He only wanted to be heard, and he was. Back in orbit, the Vigil continued its silent watch. It no longer hid. It no longer broadcast. It just collected data and beamed it down to anyone who asked. Governments couldn't shut it off. It wasn't theirs. And for the first time in a long time, the sky belonged not to armies or empires, but to everyone. Elena looked up at the stars that night and whispered, "Thank you. Not for the fear. Not for the panic, but for the wake-up call. Because sometimes the only way to see the truth is to be startled by a ghost." 6 months after the ghost ship appeared, the world was quieter, but not the same. The panic had faded, the headlines had moved on, and life went back to its usual rhythm. Yet something had changed deep down, like a stone dropped in a pond. The ripples were still spreading. The Vigil was still up there, circling Earth every hour and a half. But now it wasn't alone. 3 new satellites, built by universities in Kenya, Brazil, and Norway, had joined it in orbit. They were smaller, simpler, and fully open to the public. Anyone with an internet connection could watch real-time data on air quality, ocean temperatures, and forest cover. No secrets, no delays. Just truth, shared freely. Eris Thorne had not been seen since that night in Iceland. Some said he was building something new in a hidden workshop under the glaciers of Greenland. Others claimed he'd sailed across the Pacific to start a floating lab. But no one knew for sure. And maybe that was how he wanted it. He had made his point. Now it was up to others to carry it forward. In Colorado, Elena Ruiz walked into her new office every morning with a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. She was no longer just tracking objects for the military. She led the Global Skywatch, a civilian team funded by the United Nations. Their job was simple: watch the skies not for enemies, but for Earth itself. Her team included former spy satellite analysts, climate scientists, even a few amateur astronomers who had once posted blurry videos of the Vigil. Now they worked together, sharing data with farmers in India, teachers in Peru, and city planners in Jakarta. The sky, they believed, should not belong to generals or billionaires, but to everyone. One morning in April, Elena received a message from a high school in Nairobi. The students had built a small ground station using old radio parts and a laptop. They'd picked up a clean data stream from the Vigil, showing a sudden spike in methane over a remote part of the Sahara. At first, they thought it was a mistake, but Elena checked it against other sources and confirmed it. A hidden gas leak from an old pipeline, forgotten for years, was now pouring greenhouse gas into the air. Within a week, local authorities had sealed the leak. The students were invited to speak at a climate conference in Geneva. Elena smiled as she read their thank you note. "You showed us the sky isn't just for watching stars," they wrote. "It's for watching over each other." That was the real legacy of the Vigil. It hadn't brought aliens or war. It had brought connection. Meanwhile, governments were slowly changing too. The U.S. Space Force, once focused only on defense, now had a planetary health division. Russia and China, though still suspicious, had agreed to share some of their environmental satellite data under the new Outer Space Transparency Accord. Even private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin began offering free data slots on their rockets for small climate monitoring projects. No one trusted each other completely, but they all agreed on one thing. The planet was in trouble, and hiding the truth wouldn't help. Back in orbit, the Vigil began its final phase. In early May, it sent one last signal, not a broadcast but a quiet message to a single receiver in Iceland. The message contained its full flight log, all its sensor data, and a simple instruction: deorbit on schedule. Eris Thorne had planned this from the start. The Vigil was never meant to stay forever. It was a spark, not a flame. On May 12th, exactly 7 months after its first appearance, the ship fired its tiny thrusters one last time. It dipped lower and lower into the atmosphere, slowing just enough to avoid burning up too fast. Over the southern ocean, far from any land, it broke apart in a gentle shower of light. most of it vaporized. The rest, harmless, biodegradable pieces, drifted down into the sea. People watched from ships, from planes, even from the International Space Station. No one cheered. No one cried. They just watched in silence, as if saying goodbye to a teacher who had shown them something important. Elena stood on a hill outside Boulder, Colorado that night. She didn't need a telescope. She just looked up, and there it was, a faint streak of silver fading like a sigh. "It's gone," she whispered, but she knew it wasn't really gone. Its data lived on. Its idea lived on, and the eyes it had opened would not close again. In the months that followed, the world kept moving. Wars still happened. Politicians still argued. Storms still grew stronger. But something small had shifted. More people looked up, not with fear, but with care. More children dreamed of building satellites that healed, not hurt. More scientists spoke plainly without waiting for permission. And in quiet rooms around the world, analysts like Elena no longer asked, "Is it a threat?" First, they asked, "What is it trying to show us?" That question had become the new rule. One evening, Elena received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside was a small metal disc, no bigger than a coin, and a note written in neat handwriting. "The next one won't be a ghost. It will be a mirror. Keep watching." She held the disc up to the light. Etched into its surface was a tiny map of Earth, with a single dot over the Pacific, the place where the Vigil had first slowed down, as if to say, "Look here." She didn't know if Thorn had sent it. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Somewhere someone was already building the next Watcher. And this time they wouldn't have to hide. Elena placed the disc on her desk next to a photo of her grandmother. The old woman had once told her, "The sky doesn't belong to kings or armies. It belongs to those who look up with honest eyes." Now, more people were learning to look that way. Years later, historians would call the Vigil incident a turning point, not because of technology but because of trust. For the first time, the world had faced something unknown and chosen curiosity over fear. It hadn't been perfect. Mistakes were made. Panic had flared. But in the end, humanity had listened, and that was rare. Today, in schools and science centers, children learn about the Vigil, not as a mystery, but as a lesson. It taught us, their teachers say, that the greatest danger isn't what's out there, but what we refuse to see down here. Elena still works with the Global Skywatch. She trains new observers, many of them young, many from places once ignored by the big space powers. They come with questions, with hope, and with eyes wide open. Sometimes on clear nights she takes them outside and points to the stars. Up there, she says, is not just space. It's a mirror, and what we see depends on what we're willing to face. The ghost ship is gone, but its echo remains in data streams, in laws, in hearts, and sometimes, when the wind is still and the sky is dark, people swear they see a faint silver streak just for a second, reminding them to look, to care, and to never stop watching over the only home they have.